I think it is an extremely important meeting. First, for the obvious reason. I mean, it's a meeting between two countries whose relationship is really going to shape not only the future of politics in Asia, but the politics in other parts of the world as well. And I think there should be two objectives for this meeting. One is it's important to build a personal relationship between the two leaders, irrespective of the issues. The second is there should be some willingness on both sides to develop a common frame of reference for managing the challenges that both sides face. I think it's too early in the administration's life to imagine that we will be able to develop concrete solutions to concrete problems. Mm-hmm. I think that comes down the line. But if there is a conversation about our perceptions of the world, what kind of world order we would like to see evolve, that would be a huge step forward. And so if both sides concentrate on the personal chemistry and concentrate on having a very honest discussion about their worldviews, I think it would be a major contribution to putting US-China relations on an even keel.
What would be the ramification for other countries in Asia, for instance, for India, if US and China come back to a healthy development track of their relationship?
I think that is actually a good thing. My own view is that US-China relations have to be maintained in a certain balance for stability to exist throughout Asia. If US-China relations are frayed, or if they become conflictual, it's dangerous because it puts all the other Asian partners in a position where they have to choose. They have to choose one side or the other. That is something they don't want to do.
No.
And that is something that is not productive either for them or for us. And so to the degree that we can keep our bilateral relationship in a cooperative frame, I think that just turns out to be productive for everyone concerned.
You talk about for other people to learn from. A recent case in point is Australia. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang is in Australia, and Australian scholars have been talking about Australia feeling itself between a rock and a hard place, between a rising China and the traditional ally of the United States. Will India feel itself in a similar situation? How do you compare the position of India vis-a-vis other countries such as Australia in what they're facing at this moment?
Well, the dilemmas are true for India as well. So the same dilemmas that Australia has, India has as well, but they're not as acute. And they're not as acute because the economic relationship that Australia has with China is far deeper than the economic relationship that India has with China. So while in principle there is a balancing act, the burdens on the balancing are much more difficult in the case of Australia than with India. There's a second complication. Australia is a treaty ally of the United States, but Australia is a very strong economic partner of China. And so it feels the tugging and the pulls between the economics and the politics far more concretely than India feels, because India does not have any political obligations to the United States. The United States does not have political obligations to India. And India's economic ties with China and India's economic ties with the US are actually much weaker than Australia's ties with both China and the United States. So India faces the problem, but it's not as bad.
Is that an opportunity for India? Where do you see the future direction of India? Eventually, I think you might have to balance these two relationships as the economic and security cooperation between each side grows deeper. I mean, the US and India have been stepping up their cooperation in the past year pretty much with the signing of several important bilateral agreements.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The key word is opportunity. And for India, the opportunity must be to deepen economic ties with both China and the United States. What has happened so far in the US-India relationship is that the diplomatic elements and the strategic elements have grown, but the economic element is still relatively weak. And so it's a bit unbalanced. And my view has always been that to sustain the relationship productively, the economic tie has to be strengthened in pace with the diplomatic and the strategic tie. And the same is true for China, India's relationship with China.
Everybody's having this question on their mind with this new American administration, with this talk about America first, about Buy America, Hire America. How will that impact India in itself and in its relationship with the big countries such as the US and China?
It's certainly going to be a challenging time for India, as it is for all of America's partners throughout the world. The impact is going to be mixed, but on balance, I think it will be favorable for India. And let me explain that. For a long time, the United States has come around to the view that we need a strong relationship with India in order to preserve a balance of power in Asia. That will not change even in a Trump administration, though the terms under which we relate to India will certainly be different. But the bottom line is that India is seen very much as an opportunity for the United States. And I think that is really the foundation that will keep the relationship actually in good shape.
What about the challenges this America First might bring to India?
There are several challenges that America First brings. The first is the terms of engagement. In the past, the US was very comfortable being generous to India in terms of its policies without asking for much in return. I think that is no longer going to be the case. Under President Trump, the US will seek reciprocity. So it will continue to work with India. It will continue to give India many of the things that India wants, but it will be asking for some things in return. The second area where I think there will be challenges will be in bilateral economic relations. The United States will be seeking bigger access to the Indian market. It will be revisiting policies with respect to immigration, with respect to H-1B visas, the visa on which many Indians come to work in the United States. And as you know, President Trump's America First requires a re-emphasis on making in America at exactly the same time when Prime Minister Modi is emphasizing a make in India.
And China emphasizing made in China.
Made in China. So you have a potential for some degree of friction if it is not accompanied by a set of understandings, which I think will be important to work out in the months ahead.
Let's talk a bit about the perception of China in India. The impression I get, or my colleagues get, is often that the press in India seem to perceive a greater threat from China than what China really is. Is that the case?
I think that is the case. And I see that as linked intimately to the psychology of weaker powers. So if you look at India, the concerns about China loom large. If you go to Pakistan, the concerns about India loom large. So the psychology of weaker powers puts them in a position where they tend to amplify fears, anxieties in ways that may not always be accurate representations of reality.
What is your personal view? Do you think the world is not big enough for two countries, two powers in Asia?
I think the world is big enough for both China and India. You know, Chinese leaders and Indian leaders have emphasized that same theme. But the problem is not with whether the world is big enough. The problem is with policies that often are pursued by countries without prior coordination, without proper communication. And so one needs to look at the issues of communication and coordination in order to realize that vision of a world big enough. And I think that is the task really, not only for China and India, but also for China and the United States.